Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Future of Cross-Border Remittances and Lessons Learned in Brazil. Today's discussion will be a moderated panel discussion. It'll be 50 minutes with approximately 35 minutes of panel discussion and 15 minutes of Q&A. You can use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to ask questions. For questions that we do not cover, we will send a follow-up email. This webinar will be recorded and be made available to share afterwards. With no further ado, please welcome Thomas Trépanier.
Everyone, thanks all very much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Thomas Trépanier. I'm the Global Head of Sales for Roxe. Roxe is an open global payment network, and we use blockchain technology to unify global payment systems so that both payment and remittance companies, digital asset exchanges, stablecoin issuers, banks, and consumers can make the fastest, least expensive, and most reliable payments anywhere in the world. I have the unique pleasure of joining Logan Lemberger from Usend. Usend is trusted as the #1 payment processor dedicated to Brazil. The company pioneered remittances in accordance with U.S. laws and the norms and rules of the Central Bank of Brazil. Founded back in 2005 and located in Manhattan Beach, California, Usend offers a comprehensive range of payment solutions and has developed proprietary technology to prefer secure and low-cost services. Logan, welcome. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
And Logan, if you would introduce yourself a little bit to tell us all about a little bit about who you are and what you do for Usend.
Sure. So I've been working in cross-border payments, remittances, and other financial services space focused on bottom of the pyramid individuals and small, medium-sized, large businesses for over 10 years. With Usend, been helping to grow and expand different levels of partnerships around the world, whether that be payout network expansions, pay-ins, payouts, different types of licensing expansion, strategic partnerships in various spaces, including cryptocurrency, blockchain, and other types. But overall, Usend has, as you mentioned, been a pioneer in the cross-border payments, remittances, and all sorts of commerce space between US, Brazil, and Canada over the last 15 years, starting from very humble beginnings, helping the Brazilian diaspora community in California to send money home to support the family, and now having expanded across the US with money transmission licenses across the US and Canada, and payment institution establishment in Brazil. We've been put in a very fortunate position to be able to serve all sorts of people and individuals and businesses who have needs to move funds across borders.
Fantastic. Very interesting, Logan. Thanks very much. And welcome again. So we're going to focus our discussion today around remittances as it relates to Brazil. And to give a little bit of a backdrop for those that are not as aware of it, Brazil's huge population offers vast potential in international e-commerce growth. The challenge has always been to find ways to reach Brazil's youthful, social media savvy online shoppers. As both the card and digital wallet use continues to spike, new methods emerge to handle import taxes, and Brazil is quickly becoming more and more compelling for both local and cross-border remittances. So today, the main topics we're going to cover in this webinar include COVID and the replacement of cash, trends in Brazil for remittances, non-traditional payment channels, and the impact on technology on remittances. So it's been said that the coronavirus pandemic accelerated the payments industry digitization by 2 to 3 years, as the health concerns upended daily life in ways that trickled into spending trends and consumer habits. We've also seen how quickly consumer preferences and expectations have changed. At the onset of the pandemic in 2020, the World Bank predicted that the overall Latin America would see a 20% decrease in remittances. None of us could have predicted where we are today. However, in reality, the region saw a positive growth with a 1% increase overall, which is amazing. So, Logan, if we were to compare the crisis to what we saw, years ago. How has COVID reshaped the Latin American remittance business model and strategy for 2021 and 2022 for Usend?
Yeah, it's been a challenging year for everyone, no matter what industry you've been in, where we've all faced, the need to quickly adapt and find a path forward. With regards to cross-border remittances, commerce, and payments, it's no different, just different variables. And so for Usend, we had very large plans in 2020 with partnerships and product launches that obviously had to be pushed aside to figure out the new reality to continue to thrive and grow as possible. And so what we saw, as you mentioned, with regards to projections from the World Bank, this didn't hold true for us as well. We were able to see remittances still flow. And I think what it kind of demonstrates is the deep commitment that individuals have to their family around the world. No matter what, the money is still going to find a way to flow to support their family, even as folks lost their jobs or had their income furloughed or lowered. They did not give up in supporting their family. The other part of it was that we saw, with regards to Brazil, the exchange rate between Brazilian AI and US dollar essentially increased, where in previous years you might saw the exchange rate hovering in the 3.5 to 3.75 per AIs per dollar range. We saw lots of 2020 well over 5 AIs to the dollar. And so as a result, we had folks that found it as an excuse to send more money. Same time, businesses that transact across borders obviously were challenged, especially those that are related to the travel industry. This is not news to most of the folks that are probably watching, but as with other businesses and industries, we also saw in our industry and with ourselves a need to digitize faster. The international cross-border and remittance space has been slow overall to move to online models, because there's an inherent infrastructure of physical agents where folks have traditionally, and still for the most part, traditionally send funds to their family members. And so just as restaurants and other industries have had to quickly figure out a way to monetize their customers through digital means, that's had to happen as well for money transfer companies, as well for us. And we're fortunate that we have digital channels already in place with Usend, but we also operate an offline agent model that's Pontual, the original brand that we've operated, where those folks, they were obviously hardly hit by the closure of their storefronts and restrictions on access. And that was something that was seen across the remittances industry, whether it be with us or anyone else. The physical storefronts that individuals relied on or enjoyed going to send their money, they maybe simply couldn't go to, or they didn't feel comfortable going to for safety reasons. So that created a conundrum for customers and for the industry to figure out, how do we interact with these customers, how do we accept transactions online, and how can we do this in a sustainable and safe way. So I think this has spurred the adoption of online access for money transfers, but how do the existing parties in the space continue to adapt it going forward will be another challenge, because customers are demanding in terms of the quality of an experience that they would accept when completing any sort of financial service online.
Interesting. No, it's very interesting. Thank you for that. I guess it's still continuing as news is still coming out, as they have another lockdown in Brazil this week as we speak. It doesn't seem to end, unfortunately.
There's a tenuous and difficult situation in Brazil as well that I'll just leave it at that. But I can speak definitely more closely on things as they play out in the U.S. But there's certain the angle changes when looking at it from the Brazilian outbound side, which we also are fortunate to participate in. But most of those transactions, or a lot of them, they definitely take place already from a digital perspective.
Understood. So if you had to say, how beyond what you've already described, is there anything else that you could describe of how you've helped your customer base adapt? And if so, do you view that as an area of growth?
Yeah. One thing is serving the existing agents we do have, building in ways to serve them and allow them to do what they do, right? And we'll probably talk more about that later as we talk about growth and expansion. But the agent is a valuable part of the industry and the business, and we've had to build tools that can enable them to be successful. Mm-hmm. But we've had to think about what it is our customer wants and needs. It's been a big area of reflection for us. And I think we've been able to think about how we can serve them in more diverse ways, how we can provide value to them. And, we've learned that, there's many reasons why somebody chooses a service for money transfer. And it's not just always cost. Cost is can be the prohibitive factor, but especially if those folks that are frequent senders, they have other needs as well, such as reliability, speed, and things of that nature. And so this is something that we've built over the last few years, but it's come into more plain sight. That is the making sure that we have redundancy of services. So not necessarily being beholden or reliant to one partner. Because ultimately the customer, they care that their transaction is completed and that the value is transmitted to the person or entity that needs to receive it. And so the fact that I can give you something cheaper is not necessarily always the most important if it means that it's going to be days or weeks before it gets done. And so we've tried to build our suite of products with that in mind. And so we've actually, we've launched in the past few months the Usend global account that enables folks to hold value in US dollars as a non-US resident. And we can speak more about that. But overall, from an industry standpoint, it begs the question of how do we not be complacent? How do we think about the new normal and what our customers are looking for, and put ourselves in their shoes and their journey. And I think that's very grounding, and that's an exercise that we've tried to do, and we're fortunate that we have good kind of, the Brazilian community is not shy with expressing their opinion, so we're able to get a lot of that feedback quite quickly.
Excellent. So taking that a step further, regarding the traditionally our business is always in this industry has always been looking at shifting migration trends as the one year to another, how things can possibly cause disruption or the need to pivot. Has any of the shifting migration trends in Latin America changed the monetary flows for Brazil and across the region? Have you seen that in your side?
Yeah, migration to Brazil has continued from diverse areas. We've gotten a lot of inbound requests from partners around the world to serve African communities, for example. The different folks that have started to look at Brazil as a destination. Historically, there's been a strong flow of migration between Brazil and Japan. That's a very strong corridor as well. And then there's other regional areas where there's, whether it's unrest or financial and economic instability, where folks from Venezuela or other places have chosen Brazil as a place to settle. And as a result, that's led to new flows. At the same time, Brazil is obviously a powerhouse with regard to export of raw materials and things of the like. And as on the import side, Brazilian commerce continues to grow, and as a result, they are bringing in goods and services from the Far East, whether it's China or other regional powers. And so there's big demand around being able to securely and in a compliant fashion, be able to move funds between in and out of Brazil. And that's before we even get into the, kind of the regulatory challenges that Brazil presents itself with. And so, it's a difficult area to enter into in terms of whether you're serving individuals or consumers, because of the nature of the catch-up that it would take to understand and to operate properly.
Okay. If you had to, thank you for that, Logan. It's interesting. It's the way things are evolving. I guess if you taking into consideration what I mentioned earlier about what the World Bank's projection was, and then comparing that to reality. So instead of a 20% loss, it was 1% growth. If you had to look ahead in your own crystal ball, what might be a projection based on what you're seeing today? Would it be more of the same and a continuation of growth for 21, and if you had anything else to add to that?
Well, I can try to put my economist hat on and think through that. We are projecting growth for ourselves as a business, but not here necessarily to talk about us. Between Brazil and the U.S., I would be projecting growth. That's without going into potential political implications in Brazil, but as it is, I would project growth, especially since there are some very impactful legislation that is due to come through in Brazil, things that will make a big impact, such as the kind of freeing up companies to move money on a easier scale, moving of like some real estate purchase taxes, assuming travel is back on, enabling travelers to move in and out of the country with greater amounts of currency, and allowing banks and other financial institutions to deal in foreign currency in greater ways here and abroad, and to invest it, and removing the ability of some certain banks and financial institutions to ask for higher levels of documents from customers. So these are kind of loosening of restrictions that should have an impact on the ability for individuals and businesses to transact across border in Brazil. And so it'll be interesting to see how long when this is passed by the Senate in Brazil and implemented, but also how long it takes for the institutions to adapt, because it's easy just to pass a law, but then how do you activate this law and build it into the fabric of what you offer, and utilize your legal and compliance team to digest it and build in protocols that allow for the new usage, while also providing a good user experience, because that's where a lot of the challenge is in Brazil, is kind of understanding what the legal framework is, what the compliance requirements are, and then building a really delightful experience around it. And so, but that's where the opportunity is. And I think there's obviously, as a lot of strong fintech companies and alternative financial solution providers in Brazil. And so I think that will spur continued growth of Brazil. People underestimate the size of Brazil as a market, but they continue to get, there's more and more of kind of money flowing to Brazil in terms of, understanding the investment opportunity.
Definitely. No, most definitely. I totally agree. So if you had to say, so because of your role in the Brazilian marketplace, and since you represent the quote unquote last leg of the transaction, if you will, you actually have a pretty unique, I would say, responsibility to ensure that the end beneficiary is able to take the funds that they're expecting. Have you seen your reliance on banks changed? And if so, are the beneficiaries taking their remittances in cash, or do they leave it in digital form? Any behaviors that you might be able to expand upon?
So I can speak from the angle of what we experience, and that is, traditional cross-border fiat currency. Not currently doing significant volumes in other types. But banks play a vital role in the transaction settling process in Brazil. FX transactions need to be registered with the Central Bank of Brazil. As I'll continue to say, the challenges of adhering to Brazilian regulations are numerous.
Right.
But I'd say the importance is we've become less reliant on any single bank. There's certainly some large bank players in the market in Brazil that can help you receive funds and pay out those funds to an individual or business. The difficulty is with the sometimes opaqueness of the regulatory landscape in Brazil. At the same time, you need to pick your partners carefully. And so what we've saw over many years working with all the legitimate banks, we understood where their strengths and weaknesses were, and we suffered the pain from working with the wrong banks and dealing with the delays and the, I'd say, inefficient procedures and data requests that they have from customers. And what that led to us, concluding was that we needed to control our destiny a little bit better. And so we created our own kind of boutique payout system in Brazil, where we're integrated with numerous banks. What you'll see with foreign entities or money transfer companies or enterprises that need to make payouts into Brazil, whether it's for individuals or businesses, they'll strike up a partnership with a bank, and they'll be able to, even through the API relationship, be able to make those payouts. The challenge is reconciling with what the requirements on the transactional basis are, whether they need ID at $1 or at $1 million, whether they need documents or purchase orders, if they need tax returns. You have inconsistencies across the different banks with what they require. And even till today, they might ask for the same piece of information every time that you do a transaction, even for a small amount, even though that piece of information is already on file with them. That's being removed, hopefully, in some new legislation, but it persists. And so that creates a challenge for the person or the company that is originating these transactions, because we work with individuals and businesses who are coming to us and saying, hey, I need to get money to Brazil. You handle the rest, which is what we're there to do. However, when the bank partner that you're working with in Brazil to clear this transaction and help make the ultimate deposit is coming back every time and asking for and sometimes ridiculous requests, it's quite painful, and you on the front end you're going to lose customers.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge from the last leg angle. But where that also creates opportunity. And so the opportunity for us was to build multiple relationships and redundancy across a network of partners, and then offer this access to numerous individuals and businesses across the world. And we're fortunate that we even had regulators in the US recommending working with us rather than some of the other banks in Brazil, because unfortunately there's been certain banks that have employed unsavory individuals who've brought kind of trouble or poor reputation to those banking institutions, and so within even in the last few weeks, you've seen very significant international money transfer companies having to shut down their Brazilian operation because of their reliance on a bank that was undergoing examination and in trouble due to some of their choice of banking partner. And so, it's an ongoing challenge that for anyone that's looking to enter the Brazilian market to make payouts there for any type of reason, we always encourage folks, whether you never work with us, we understand, it's fine, but whoever you're working with, complete a strong due diligence, understand the reputational challenges, and understand also that just because somebody is not breaking the law or the rules in the US does not mean that they're doing things properly in Brazil, and vice versa.
Right.
And so we have a higher burden to meet as a regulated and licensed money transmitter in the U.S. and Brazil, and so it's something that we know quite well. But I think there's optimism that the regulations will continue to change, but it's also that creates challenges because now you need to adapt
Sure.
to change regulations, and so it's something that is a challenge, but we choose to look at every challenge as an opportunity.
Now you've set the bar, which is excellent.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it's something that we set the bar for ourselves because we know we want to answer to ourselves in terms of knowing that we're doing things properly and by the book, and with strict adherence to our local regulators and national and federal regulators. Because it's really confusing. I didn't even mention taxes and being able to ensure that whatever type of transaction you're following the proper tax code that goes along with it. Just right there is a whole hours and hours and hours of work to get started with. So it's great fun to learn the Brazilian banking system and their codes.
No, without a doubt. No, fantastic job. I guess if I were to take that a step further, so if you talked a lot about how you've had to set yourselves up for success, working across from the U.S., Canada, and then certainly we're spending most of our time talking about Brazil here. But is there any increase in the allowable amount sent on your platform? Can you talk a little bit about, during the crisis, have you had to make any adjustments, or is there any limits on the amounts that can be sent and received?
So we've tried to focus on not necessarily placing limits, but how do we just put in place the proper thresholds that allow us to complete any transaction with a compliance comfort level.
Okay.
So that means that we try to leverage a risk-based approach, which is, I think, for some is hard to comprehend, or they simply are very set in their ways. But understanding whether this industry is something that requires additional review from a compliance standpoint, whether it's enhanced due diligence or specific documentation, or just understanding what is the purpose of this transaction and what is the reason for it and what are the source of funds. And if you can answer lots of those questions, you can get comfortable with different amounts, whether it's $10 or $10 million. So we focused on how do we remove barriers and put in place a pathway for any type of transaction to be completed, while in an underlying way satisfying our local and federal international regulators. With regards to the crisis, we've realized that things need to move quicker. People and businesses want to have their transactions done suddenly when things come up. And so we've tried to remove more of those barriers. And one of the ways is to create a better onboarding platform in terms of getting people started, understanding that someone might need to just do a transaction today, whether it's an individual or business, and how do we create a path for them to onboard themselves, to initiate a transaction and have it paid that day, rather than relying on a drawn out process of enhanced due diligence for all customers. But how do we create a tiered automated approach that allows folks to get onboarded, and as their volume increases, we can allow them to send more and request additional documentation or information as necessary. Every money transfer company or every business is going to have their own limits or thresholds as they see fit. But our approach, and I think it's something that I hope others will embrace and use too, is to take a risk-based approach and understand the risk in each type of transaction, each dollar amount of transaction, and then say, how do I mollify the risk here? What information will make me feel comfortable to process this transaction? And then relying on your fundamentals from there.
Got it. Okay. Earlier in our conversation, you had alluded to some of the changes that are going on in the local market. And dating back to as far as 2016, the central bank in Brazil has launched some new regulatory infrastructure or agenda, if you will, to kind of boost competition and financial innovation and inclusion in the marketplace. since over the past 5+ years, the entry of new non-banks or neobanks, if you want to call them, as the term is commonly used nowadays, and other mobile network operators have started to kind of position themselves. This has opened up a lot of positive things for the local market. How is Usend responding to that? Are you positioning yourself in a different way in order to help out the segment, or is it something that you view as an opportunity?
Massive opportunity. The Brazilian community in the U.S. and in Brazil, they're highly mobile. They are educated. They are thirsty for technology, and we want to embrace that and serve them. We've built our business over the past 15+ years to embrace the Brazilian community wherever they are, and we've understood that as the customer in Brazil has gotten more comfortable with digital technology, mobile technology, financial services, and merging of all those, that we can play a role in that. The Usend brand itself is well known in the Brazilian community around the world, and so how do you leverage that? You build financial tools and products that can help them better take care of their financial lives. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was the Usend Global Account, which is essentially an e-wallet or a borderless account where folks can hold funds in US dollars and actively engage in cross-border payments, remittances, buy gift cards, or have a account number and routing number linked to it. They can have a debit card attached to it, and other services that will soon be announced. But essentially, we're trying to enable individuals to feel like they're a local wherever they go. And lots of Brazilians do travel, and they want access to financial services in an easy way. And so we're able to leverage the deep relationships we have in the community and offer other complementary financial services that make funds comfortable for people to access wherever they are. And this is without getting into the volatility challenges that the Brazilian AI commonly faces, which pushes individuals and businesses to feel like they would prefer to hold funds in US dollars, or to be able to receive payments from, whether they're a seller on Etsy or on Amazon, and hold those funds in the US, or they have multiple offices around the world, or they're importing or exporting on a small level. We want to empower individuals and small, medium businesses to be able to connect their financial lives around the world. We've a lot of what we've built has come from understanding the individual needs. We have deep relationships in the UFC and Bellator fighting communities, and so we've seen the challenges that Brazilian communities around the world face when they travel and they need to collect funds or take their funds with them. It's hard. And so we've made sure that we've partnered with proper folks, whether it's banking institutions in Brazil, mobile phone operators, and any types of ancillary financial services to provide and serve the needs of the individuals and businesses that we've already built strong relationships with. And this is, whether it's Usend or anyone else, it's kind of what I think you should be thinking about is how do you lean in and embrace the customers you have. Lots of corridors outside of Brazil, whether it's in Latin America or the rest of the world, there's lots of options. And so customers are looking for ways and reasons to build relationships with a specific brand. And so, if I'm sending money to Mexico, there's obviously lots of options, but why am I choosing one over the other? Right. You could say it's price, it could be exchange rate, but all of us as cross-border money transfer companies, whether we're serving individuals or businesses, it's key to try to build a relationship. And so other financial services or complementary products are definitely a way to do that, because if we're all connected to the same payout partners and the last leg, as you mentioned, then ultimately it's only a matter of our kind of pricing strategy and marketing tools. So how do we create real value for individuals and businesses that we serve, so that they see that it's really worth their while to build that loyalty.
Fantastic. I guess just keeping an eye on the time. So I'm actually gonna open it up to a few questions that have come up, and one in particular that seems to be a quite interesting one here. So, question is the following: as customers are looking to find unique ways to send and receive money through what we would call, I guess, non-traditional channels, including the likes of Instagram, checkout buttons, and Facebook Messenger, and so on and so forth. From your vantage point, what have they gravitated to locally in Brazil, and how's that changed, your view or your approach?
So again, most folks underestimate the size of Brazil and the market there. Hundreds of millions of people are accessing mobile technology. There's a very strong Brazilian TikTok and Instagram influencer community that have very engaged followings. There's cross-border influencers as well, folks in Brazil that make content for people in the U.S. and folks in the U.S. that make content for people in Brazil. And so that's created a need to connect those individuals to receive money. So there's, obviously, payouts are a big deal. How do you make mass payouts into Brazil and do it in a way where folks are receiving the funds in a way that they would like? And so given the position that we're in as the leader in cross-border commerce and payments between the U.S. and Brazil and vice versa, it's created great opportunities because we're regulated in both places. That we have the trust of that underlying our services, and so it's enabled us to to offer services that are efficient and affordable with great redundancy for partners, whether it's for an individual or business. And as more brands seek to take advantage and expand into Brazil, it creates a bigger need for local collection, as it's called. Meaning that if you're an e-commerce brand or a fashion brand or an electronics brand, you should be thinking about, if you're not already, like, how do I offer my products in Brazil? But at the same time, if I'm a large fashion brand, I might not want to go and set up shop in Brazil and try to understand the entire system and payments, banking relationships, regulatory needs, rather than more likely you're going to work with an entity to help you collect funds there and repatriate those funds back to the U.S. And that's where we've definitely found advantages of being regulated in both places. We have inbound every 1 to 2 days of whether it's all the way down from a small real estate office all the way up to the biggest travel and e-commerce brands in the world that are coming to us because they want to understand how they can collect funds from Brazilian customers, because the Brazilian customers want their goods and services. And so that's where we found a lot of the opportunity. We've seen that folks are the big tech companies like Facebook, you've alluded to, they launched services or desire to launch services through the WhatsApp channel over the last year, but they clearly didn't do it properly to the liking of the central bank and ran into issues themselves. So the largest guys in the industry are not immune to the challenges that you might face with regards to the regulatory nature of Brazil. So it's something to be very careful with, but also there's the paths aren't that hard if you find and look through the right partners. So that's kind of what we're trying to leverage everything that we have under our belt already. From a regulatory angle, we're a compliance focused and compliance first company, but that also opens the doors for us to be able to do great things. And I think that's anyone that's kind of taking the time to focus on Brazil and build a compliance protocols around the ever-changing landscape there, will have a great opportunity to help connect the rest of the world to Brazil. Right.
Okay, very interesting. It's definitely it's funny how as you rightly point out, just because you maybe the largest one on the block, it doesn't mean you're able to get right in. You've already paved the way. It's interesting to see. I guess it's a few other interesting questions that have come up from the audience. One in particular I like quite well, a lot. It's how has blockchain technology changed your role in facilitating cross-border payments?
So I'd say that hasn't necessarily changed our role yet, but it could. What I mean by that is that, you know, folks in the cross-border payments, money transfer, remittance world have been, you know, sometimes beaten to death with the, you know, the chance of blockchain, cryptocurrency is going to, you know, eat your lunch, going to put you out of business, going to send you away. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet, and obviously, it's a long way to go to see that happening. However, I think that those that are in remittances and cross-border payments and commerce are, you know, maybe they have their ears a little bit more open and are looking for ways that they can implement blockchain technology or cryptocurrency in some fashion. Ultimately, today, still the, you know, individual that's sending money back home to their family, you know, they prefer fiat currency. That might not be the case necessarily in certain corridors where there's high volatility or lack of trust in local currency or in the government, and so there's opportunity there. With regards to, you know, blockchain specifically, you know, it's I think people have had a challenge with, you know, kind of separating the blockchain element from the cryptocurrency element, and understanding that, you know, blockchain itself has value and application.
Yeah.
But the education part is challenging to bring to the kind of cross-border international money remittance industry. How do you, you know, what is the way to properly explain that to everyone and show them a path where they can, you know, use it? Obviously, historically, Ripple has been the loudest in trying to be that educator and incentivizing the money transfer industry, to get involved and to start using their technology. I think to put it simply, they've had mixed success with that. Obviously, another announcement yesterday of the termination of their partnership with MoneyGram. But, you know, as if you survey the folks that have been working with Ripple around the country and the world, you know, you'll see some places where it was successful from a standpoint of creating a technology framework that enabled disparate parties to be able to transmit value between each other in an easier way. And that's where there's kind of the opportunity still lies. You know, Ripple's, you know, still out there, and still people are, you know, we are, you know, public knowledge, we're integrated with Ripple. And there's you can see lots of folks that are as well. But they've had challenging few months from a PR standpoint.
Sure.
So that's some of the kind of, it hasn't, you know, our role hasn't changed yet, but there's lots of opportunity, and it's a matter of having a team that is open to it, having banking partners and infrastructure that you have strong relationships with, that you can discuss these things with, and then how do you take that opportunity and build a technology in with the existing legacy frameworks of remittance and money transfer companies. And then how do you satisfy the local, state, and federal regulators with regards to compliance, BSA, AML, and KYC with blockchain and cryptocurrency? These are all big questions that, you know, frankly, not all money transfers till, you know, to date have, you know, been able to dedicate time towards.
Understood. Okay, one last question. This one here. So I read to shape this in a better way, but so I guess the question really comes from the global view. So if we're to say that the remittance segment dominated the market and accounted for more than 40% of the global revenue share in 2020, from your viewpoint as a money transfer operator, what aspects of your business have enabled you to share in this global growth spike? So beyond what you've, you know, talked about or today, is there anything you'd like to add?
What has it helped account for growth for us?
Yeah, it's like what aspects of your business within Usend has enabled you to be able to share in the overall global growth spike? If you could highlight anything at all.
I think this is less attributable from a analytics standpoint, but very important. Our leadership and founder Fernando Paisano definitely have implemented a a culture of transparency and partnership across the industry. And that's, I think, anyone that knows our team knows that. And so what I mean by that is, trying to be a partner for anyone that needs to move funds between Brazil, US, and vice versa, and focusing on how do we help you do that. Not necessarily always ensuring that we're maximizing profit on every single deal, but we're making sure we're maximizing the relationship and the long-term partnership opportunity. And so that's helped us to grow. And with that, being flexible and being willing to change quickly have been very vital. And then looking for opportunities and being able to rely on our compliance foundation and the vertical integrated nature of our product suite between US and Brazil with those, with that compliance comfort beneath our feet allows us to go in many different directions, allows us to work with a diversity of individuals and businesses, and lets us to not necessarily be reliant on one customer or the peaks and valleys of a cyclical economy, as we've been dealing with over the last year. Not that this was a cyclical event, but we experience those frequently, and so we want to be prepared for that.
Okay, so it sounds like you've weathered the storm. Well, Logan, that's all we had for today. Is there anything you'd like to? You've given us a wealth of information, and I can't thank you enough. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with beyond what you've mentioned so far?
Say that the international money transfer and family remittance community is traditionally overlooked and overseen, and they provide a very strong value and service to millions of individuals and small businesses around the world. And the opportunity remains to leverage this, this unique group of companies that have licenses, have know-how, and understand how to move money across borders. And so whether you're a large bank or you're a fintech, there is a lot of opportunity in working with money transfer companies because they understand individuals and how to move money legally and usually quite quickly. And the money transfer companies themselves, they have the opportunity to figure out how to improve their offerings, to make them more digital, to make them efficient, to create delightful experiences. And I think that we'll see a lot of continued changes, whether it be acquisitions or mergers or new service offerings from money transfer companies and banks that are trying to deal with the challenges of unbundling of the banking stack and changing economic times. So that's my spiel to close.
Excellent. On behalf of everyone here at Roxe, I want to thank you, Logan, for your time today. Really do appreciate it. Your insights are extremely valuable, and I look forward to doing this again with you in the near future to learn more from your experiences down south of the border.
Thank you very much for your questions and your insights. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Logan.